Hey everybody, it's Miss C. Today I'm going to talk about the instructions for the value worksheets that you should be doing today if you're in our classes. If you're not in our classes and you're just doing this from home, you can do these same exercises just on any sheet of paper. You just need to draw, appropriate boxes and or find the appropriate coloring sheets. This is based on an older set of worksheets that we had. You can see right here what these are going to kind of look like by the time they're done. Also here, that'll help give you some idea of what's going on. But for now, let's talk about what you're actually doing. So first off, as soon as you get this, you should put your name in. If you don't put your name on, then you don't get credit. So much sadness. Put your class period over here. Down here, we have several different things that are going to become value scales. Value scales are exactly what they look like. They have a range of values from dark to light. It doesn't matter which end you put the dark side on, as long as you remember that it needs to not all be the same value all the way through. They're also each labeled with a different type of shading / coloring that you're going to do. These four right here are going to be black and white. This one is going to require the use of 2 colored pencils. So first off, blended shading is blended. It is smooth. You're going to want a pencil for this one. What I like to do on all of these regardless is give myself some tick marks. Usually I'll divide in half, divide those halves in half, and then divide those halves also in half. So I have about 8 or so little steps. You can see my little pencil marks right here where those are. That just gives me a good idea and a reminder that I need to be changing my values as I'm going through. I always like to have dark at the bottom because it's a low value. Higher values are paler, and I tend to associate those things together. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my pencil to just start shading. And as I move up my ticks, I'm going to have less pressure. I'm not super worried about going over the edge of my box right now because I can always erase it. Now here was my first pass, and you'll notice that I don't have anything in either of my 2 top little sections, but I definitely need these to be different, which means I need to start bringing my values up. A good frame of reference is I want my middle grays to be right here in the middle, this one to be a little darker of a middle gray, this one to be a little lighter of a middle gray or so. I say boxes, they're not actually different from one another. And I can always make things darker. What's difficult is making things lighter. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to make my entire bottom a little bit darker so that whenever I come up here, I can continue to make it lighter. And what I should have by the time I'm done is one smooth transition from dark to light. Now, if you're having trouble making that smooth transition, like your pencil doesn't work super well, some hints. Use the side of your pencil, not the tip, to shade. You'll notice that I did not hold it like this where my tip was down. I held it to the side. Or you can use one of these. This is a tortillon, a blending stump, as you will. And if you use it in circles, it does pretty good at smearing all of my pencils together so that they're nice and smooth. I don't have a lot of back and forth movement. So they look like that. And then I'm just going to use my eraser to clean up the edges because I like to be neat. That is blended shading. Hatching, cross-hatching, and stippling, you're going to want to find a pen for. If you use a pencil for this, you usually end up doing something a little bit incorrectly because you're starting to use pressure the way you do with blended, but we're going to use a pen for this one. So again, I'm going to make my little tick marks, half again beyond that. Those are just my little marks to help me make sure that I'm remembering. And hatching is going to be lines that all go in one direction. I feel really comfortable doing little flicks off to the right like this. Some people prefer up and down, some people prefer side to side. It doesn't really matter what direction you want your little flicks to go as long as they're all going in one direction. This is almost like drawing fur on a dog. And what I'm going to do is they're going to be really close together and stacked right here, but up here at the top, I'm going to have very few little marks. But each box should have more than the last. So this one only has 2, this one has maybe 7, this one has like maybe 15, 30, 15, 20, somewhere around there. It's going to end up looking like this. Now you can see hatching and cross hatching are very similar, but cross hatching, I'm not just going in one direction. I went to the right, then I went to the left, then I went up and down. And to make this last part really, really dark, I went side to side down in the bottom as well. Stippling, exact same thing, except I'm using dots. This one, you're gonna wanna take a few breaks. So do this one a little bit, come and work on this one. Do this one a little bit, come and work on this one. Do this one a little bit, work on this one some more. Do this one a little bit, come work on this one. This one is a pain in the patootie. So to give yourself a little bit of help, divide it in half and X out one of the halves. If you get it skinnier than that though, be careful, I might not give you credit. Okay, just make yourself, make your life a little bit easier. All right, last one is blended color. For this one, you're gonna need 2 different colored pencils. Oh, I almost forgot. On stippling, you are gonna wanna use a pen or a marker. Don't use a Sharpie or anything that will bleed because there is stuff on the back side of this and you don't want Sharpie bleeding through. But if you're doing a pen, use small little circles. Don't just tap. Note that these circles are much bigger than that circle. So while this might take a little bit longer to do, overall, filling up the space takes a whole lot less than if I were trying to tap, 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 tap infinitesimally tiny little dots to fill that space. That's why skinny markers also work really well because you can tap, tap, tap a little bit and they will still show up. If you are tapping so loud that anyone can hear your tapping against the table, you are harming whatever instrument you are using. There should be no sound to your tap, tap, tap if you're using an instrument that can tap, tap, tap. So be aware of that. All right, PSA done. You need 2 different colors for your blended color. And what you want to do is you want to put 2 lines around your box. One up a little higher, one down a little bit lower. Below the line, you should have 1 color by itself. Note that this is very similar to how I did the blended shading with my with my regular pencil. But I'm going to stop where my upper line is, and the rest of this is just going to get darker and darker, using a little bit more pressure. But below this line, this is where that dotted line was, my lower dotted line, this should all be the 1 color. And then this should fade up, but it should stop at that 2nd one. My other color is going to go the opposite direction. It's going to start with more pressure up at the top, and it should be just this color until I hit my top green, my top dotted line. And then from there, it should fade out until I hit where this line was, which means this whole middle section, I should have both colors overlapping. Now, because I'm using my Prismacolor colored pencils, I'm gonna keep going over these a couple times until I have some good layer on there. And then I can blend it either using a colorless blender or a little bit of rubbing alcohol on a Q-tip to get those nicely smooth. But just one time is not enough coverage because I can still see a lot of those little white speckles of my paper showing through. You want to make sure that you add enough that you're not going to see those. This one has been blended with a colorless blender, and there was enough on there that you can actually see where it started scraping through a little bit and taking some of the color back off. All right, so that's the first page. Second page, you have a couple things that you need to look at. There's several different shapes. Each box is labeled with a type of shading. So this top box is hatching, this one is cross hatching, and this one is stippling. And each box has a light bulb. That is a light source direction. So in this box, it's the top left. In this box, it's the top right. And in this box, it's the top center. And what you're going to be doing is you are going to be shading each of those boxes with the correct shading type. So for example, here's what hatching is going to look like. Here's what stippling is going to look like. Here's cross hatching, and here is blending. Mind you, you're not doing blending on yours. And you're going to be shading appropriately. What you want to remember is that the side of the object furthest away from your light source, in this case of this cube, it's going to be my right-hand side. That's my darkest side. Whatever side is closest to my light source is going to be the lightest side. That's going to be this one right here. In flat-sided shapes, like cubes, Each side will be a different value. And in rounded shapes like the sphere and the cylinder, there's going to be a gradient from light to dark based on which direction my light should be coming from. So if you want to take a look at these, that'll give you a little bit of a hint on what these are supposed to look like right here. All right, that one I'm not going to show you too much more because that should be pretty self-explanatory. Not work, this one is another exercise that's a little bit on the easier side. You have two tasks. You need to make all of these lines appear rounded by shading the edges darker than the center. I'm going to show you what I mean right here. So on this one, I'm going to start by shading the entire thing kind of a light gray. I just like doing this myself. That's something I find to be easier. Then I'm going to come in and I'm going to start shading the edges a little bit darker just by using a little bit more pressure just on the edges. And then to make this a little bit stronger, I'm going to take my eraser. I'm going to erase right through that middle section. It's going to look something like that. This is going to make it look like there's a rounded top. Then, second thing that I need to do, make the lines that go underneath look further down by shading the darker where they go under. So you want to look at all these little bridges, and you're going to shade along the edges of those little bridges like this. Try and make them pretty dark because these are bits that are going underneath. And once you've done that to all of your different little sections, this will look like a very 3D little piece of metalwork, perhaps. So those are your tasks on these particular exercises. Pretty simple overall, in my opinion, at least for what you're supposed to do. Actually, getting them done neatly is the key. Neatness matters. Go as slow as you need to get it done.